The engine ticks as it cools in the suffocating Florida humidity. A young man steps out of a white 2012 Ford Transit van, his heavy boots hitting the sun-baked concrete of a quiet suburban driveway. He doesn't speak. He doesn't look back at the passenger seat. He grabs his bags, walks into his parents' pristine house, and quietly shuts the front door behind him. 2,000 miles away, the freezing wind whips through the jagged, unforgiving peaks of the Grand Teton Mountains, tearing across a desolate stretch of dirt and sagebrush known as Spread Creek. The ground there has recently been disturbed. In a quiet, anxious home in New York, a mother's phone lights up with a cryptic text message that makes absolutely no sense. The girl who owned the van is missing. The man who drove it home is making himself a sandwich, surrounded by the deafening silence of a secret he intends to take to the grave. Van life is sold to us as the ultimate American dream. As you sell your material possessions, buy a vehicle, and trade the soul-crushing corporate grind for open roads, endless sunsets, and total freedom. Gabby Petito bought into this dream completely. She was a 22-year-old girl with a radiant smile, a keen eye for aesthetics, and a desperate desire to build a following as a travel vlogger. She spent months curating the perfect bohemian aesthetic, turning a stark, empty cargo van into a rolling canvas of fairy lights, succulents, and intricate macrame. While on camera, it was a breathtaking fairy tale. Her Instagram feed was a mosaic of canyon horizons and sun-drenched kisses. She was selling a lifestyle of boundless liberty. But true crime rarely happens in the wide open spaces. It happens in the claustrophobia of closed doors. When you live in 60 square feet of metal with another human being, there is no escape. The van ceases to be a vehicle of freedom and becomes a mobile panopticon. Every breath, every text, every micro-expression, or every mood shift is magnified and inescapable. You are trapped in a rolling tin can where an argument cannot end with someone walking into the next room and slamming a door. There are no other rooms. The American West is beautiful, but it is deeply, terrifyingly indifferent. Long stretches of highway without cell service meant Gabby was systematically removed from her support network. When the camera turned off, the golden hour fairy tale dissolved into the suffocating reality of a volatile or escalating relationship miles away from anyone who could hear a scream. The fracture in their carefully curated facade didn't happen in the dark, isolated wilderness. It happened in broad daylight, on the scorching asphalt of Moab, Utah. On August 12, 2021, a concerned citizen dialed 911. The caller's voice was urgent, describing a domestic dispute outside the Moonflower Community Cooperative. The caller didn't just say two young people were arguing over directions. The caller specifically reported seeing a gentleman slapping a girl, hitting her aggressively, before they both scrambled into a white van and sped off down the highway. This is our first terrifying glimpse through the cracks of the Instagram filter. This wasn't a lover's quarrel or a bad day on the road. It was a physical altercation playing out in front of tourists and locals. A sudden eruption of violence that shattered the bohemian illusion. The police intercepted the van near the entrance to Arches National Park shortly after. What happens next on the police bodycam footage is one of the most studied, scrutinized, and profoundly tragic interactions in modern true crime history. When the officers approach the passenger side of the van, the tension is palpable and immediately, sickeningly lopsided. Gabby is sobbing uncontrollably. Her chest heaves. She is hyperventilating, struggling to string a cohesive sentence together without gasping for air, constantly wiping frantic tears from her flushed, terrified face. She looks like a cornered animal who has just run a marathon. Brian, on the other hand, steps out of the driver's seat entirely composed. He is calm, articulate, and dangerously charismatic. He cracks self-deprecating jokes with the officers. He talks casually about his love for nature, his bare feet, and his disdain for plastic bottles. Right before our eyes, we watch a masterclass in psychological manipulation unfold on the side of a dusty highway. Gabby takes the blame for absolutely everything. She tells the officers she has OCD, that she is mean, that she was frustrating him, that she started it. She points to a visible scrape on Brian's face as evidence of her own guilt, desperately trying to protect the man who, just hours ago, was seen striking her in public. We have to pause here. Ours because human psychology dictates that we look at this scene and ask a vital, haunting question. Why is the victim desperately defending her attacker? In the realm of domestic abuse, there is a heavily documented, insidious phenomenon known as reactive abuse. An abuser will methodically push, provoke, gaslight, and terrorize their victim in private, chipping away at their sanity hour by hour, day by day, until the victim's nervous system shatters and they finally react physically to escape the psychological torture. When the authorities arrive, the abuser instantly shifts gears. They become perfectly calm, playing the composed, rational victim, while the actual victim looks hysterical, unhinged, and violent. Brian Laundrie weaponized Gabby's mental health struggles against her. He isolated her in that van, triggered her anxiety, pushed her to the absolute brink of a panic attack, and then stood back to let the police view her as the sole irrational aggressor. The police, well-meaning but utterly misreading the psychological dynamic of coercive control, categorized the incident not as domestic violence, but as a mental health crisis. They bonded with Brian over his calm demeanor. They bought him a comfortable hotel room for the night. They left Gabby sleeping alone in the back of the sweltering van, crying herself to sleep. The system didn't just fail Gabby Petito that day in Utah. It validated her abuser. It handed her directly back to her executioner with the message that she was the problem. The tension in the van did not dissipate after Moab. It fermented into something lethal. 2 weeks later, on August 27th, witnesses at the Mary Piglet's Tex-Mex restaurant in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, observed another chilling incident. Brian engaged in a highly aggressive, explosive argument with the restaurant staff over a bill. Witnesses described his demeanor as purely venomous. Gabby was seen crying, apologizing profusely to the staff for his explosive behavior. This was the mask slipping entirely. Brian was losing control of his environment, and his rage was spilling out into public view once again. This public display of anger is the last confirmed, credible sighting of Gabby Petito alive. This brings us to the void, the terrifying black hole in the timeline where the narrative completely shatters. We know that on August 25th, she made her final curated Instagram post, a strangely generic photo of herself holding a small pumpkin with no location tag and a caption lacking her usual bubbly voice. But here is the massive, lingering question we have to leave hanging in the freezing Wyoming air. On August 27th, the same day as the restaurant incident, Gabby's mother received a terrifyingly strange text message from Gabby's phone. It read, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Stan was Gabby's grandfather, but Gabby never, ever called him Stan. To her mother, this wasn't a casual message about poor reception. It was a flare gun fired into the dark. It was a coded distress signal from a daughter trying to bypass her captor. 3 days later, on August 30th, another text arrived from the device. "No service in Yosemite." But the van was nowhere near Yosemite. It was hundreds of miles away. So if Gabby wasn't in California, and she definitely wasn't writing those texts, who was holding her phone in the dead of night? Who was trying to manipulate her digital footprint to buy themselves time? We will answer that question, but first, we have to look at the monster hiding in plain sight, and the family that built a fortress around him. September 1st. When Brian Laundrie arrives in Northport, Florida, pulling the white van into his parents' driveway,